One night, Lajla was coming home from after-school care. She opened the door and called out, "Mom, I'm back!" But then out of nowhere, a stranger grabbed her from behind and kidnapped her. When Lajla came to, she was trapped in a glass cell. There were some drawings scattered around her, and getting out of that jail seemed impossible. Fast forward to now. Lajla's got a PhD in psychology and is a resident lecturer at a big-shot university. On top of that, she's researching the minds of criminals who kidnap kids, digging into what messed up psychological stuff drives them to do such awful things. Right after her lecture wrapped up, Lajla got hit with some bad news. Her mom had passed away. She booked a flight right away and headed to her hometown, a small town in Sweden where she grew up. Her dad, Walter Ness, was tinkering with something at home and got all emotional seeing Lajla after so long. His eyes showed both the joy of seeing his daughter and the pain of losing her mom, Anne-Marie. Lajla's childhood buddies, Eddie and Jim, were stoked to see her too. They started catching up on old times, but you could tell they were also torn up about Anne-Marie. Lately, the rural community here has been banding together to protest against mining. They're fighting for forest preservation, climate protection, and against exploitation. Today was Anne-Marie's funeral, and Lajla's childhood friend Louise showed up too. Louise has been having a rough time with her husband, Saeed, for a while now. She wanted to open up about it, but clammed up around her daughter, Alicia. On top of that, the coal mining mess has the locals pretty pissed at them. Someone even chucked an egg at their car on the way to the funeral. Louise was super worried about Alicia's safety and wanted to talk to Lajla privately for advice. Lajla's flying back to the States tomorrow at 11 in the morning, so they decided to meet up early before she leaves. On the other hand, Walter wasn't thrilled about Lajla heading back so soon, but he didn't really have a reason to stop her. The next morning, Lajla said goodbye to Walter and showed up at Louise's place. When she got there, she saw the door was open, and in the bathroom, Louise's body was lying in the tub. Freaked out, she immediately called her Uncle Thomas, the town's police commissioner. Louise's mom, Christina, was a wreck, crying her eyes out. Things got worse when they found out Alicia was missing too. Word of Alicia's disappearance spread like wildfire, and a search team was sent out. Alicia's dad, Saeed, joined the team, and they combed through the whole forest. Morning turned to evening, but there was no sign of Alicia. Everyone was exhausted and taking a break when out of the blue, the commissioner had Saeed arrested. Turns out they found Alicia's clothes and shoes outside an entrance to the mining area. But why would Saeed do something like that to his own daughter? That question was on everyone's mind, and it didn't stop there. Birds in the area were mysteriously dying off, and nobody had an answer for it. The next morning, they questioned Saeed, asking about his relationship with Louise. Saeed claimed everything was fine with her, but that was a straight-up lie. During a search of the house, the police found divorce papers that Louise had filed. Saeed finally admitted they'd been fighting, but he swore up and down he didn't kill her. Either way, the commissioner was now waiting for the autopsy report, which could be the key to cracking this mystery. Meanwhile, Lajla was hell-bent on finding Alicia and ditched her plans to head back to the States. From what she could figure, someone close to Alicia might be behind her disappearance. So she went to talk to Alicia's grandma, Christina. There she learned about a guy who'd come to fix up Louise's house a few days earlier. Alicia and this guy got along great, and they'd been making videos together. The guy was from a rough part of town, and Walter wasn't keen on going there. But in cases like this, the first 48 hours are critical. Finally, after Lajla insisted, they went to meet the guy. Turns out the guy had a 10-year-old daughter, and he'd mixed some of her videos with Alicia's. He'd left his family behind to make some cash, so he was scared of getting tangled up with the cops. In the background of one of his videos, there was a dude who looked like he was kissing Louise. The guy said this car-owning dude would swing by to see Louise after Saeed left for work. That made it pretty clear Louise might have been having an affair with him. Lajla and Walter showed the video to Commissioner Thomas, but instead of being grateful, he flipped out on them. Truth is, he didn't like anyone meddling in his business. Anyway, the autopsy report came in, and it showed Louise was knocked out before she was killed. If the affair thing was true, Saeed might have had a reason to murder her. In today's questioning, he kept lying through his teeth. He claimed he was in Stockholm when it all went down, but they'd only know for sure once his phone's location data came in, which was still pending. Could this be the same guy who kidnapped Lajla 20 years ago? Lajla started connecting the dots to her old case. Back then, she'd managed to outsmart the kidnapper and escape. It was on this very road where two women had saved her. That same night, the mine's alarm started blaring like crazy. By morning, word spread that toxic water was leaking from the mine. The townsfolk couldn't even use the water coming into their homes. People were pissed. They'd already been demanding the mine shut down, but nobody listened back then. First, the poisoned water was killing birds, and now it was a threat to people's lives. What if their kids accidentally drank the toxic water and died? Who'd take the blame for that? Finally, Christina got it and decided to shut the mine down until the issue was fixed. Meanwhile, Saeed's phone location report came in. He was in fact in Stockholm during the incident. With no evidence against him, they let him go. Then out of nowhere, they got a video from the kidnapper showing Alicia passed out. The kidnapper didn't make any demands, so nobody could figure out what the hell he wanted. Meanwhile, Lajla's childhood friend Eddie was nowhere to be seen lately. When they asked his wife Nikki, she broke down crying. About a week ago, Eddie came home with $35,000 in cash. When Nikki pressed him about it, he just said, "Live it up." But when he heard at a public meeting that the mine leak might be tied to the Alicia Louise case, he freaked out and took off. Nikki was scared he'd gotten himself into deep trouble over some small screw-up. That night, she left their daughter Isla with Walter and went looking for Eddie. She found him wasted at his dad's hunting cabin in the woods. When they questioned him, he spilled that he'd been paid $35,000 to cause the mine leak, and he only talked to the guy through email. Then they found out the emails Eddie got and the video clip of Alicia came from the same server. That meant the same person was behind both. When Lajla got home, she spotted a drawing next to Isla and was floored. When she asked about it, Isla mentioned some guy named Iki who came to her through the window. He'd made the drawing, and he had a tattoo of a red flower on his hand. This clue could be a big break in figuring out who Iki was. From the start, there was this guy on the research team, Daniel Frick, who was always looking for a chance to chat with Lajla. Today, when Jim was at the mall, throwing shade at Lajla for being a police snitch, Daniel jumped in to defend her. After that, they got to talking, and Daniel asked her to grab coffee. Lajla couldn't say no. That same evening at 4, news broke that another 10-year-old girl had gone missing. Iki was pulling off one crime after another like it was nothing, and the police seemed clueless. That's why former Commissioner Walter showed up at the station to check on things. There he found a voicemail of a girl crying, begging to go home, with the sound of rushing water in the background. They quickly looked into nearby dams and found out a car was spotted, parked near one at 4 that afternoon. It wasn't just any car. It was a Peugeot 205, the only one in the whole country registered to some Vanya Frick. Vanya was 84, so no one could suspect her. But here's the thing. She had dementia and got sent to a care facility 6 months ago. Still, someone had been using her home internet and more for the past 2 weeks while she was gone. As soon as Tomas got this lead, he put together a team and headed for Mora. Meanwhile, as promised, Lajla was with Daniel. Right then, Walter called her. He said they'd tracked down Iki's hideout and asked, "By the way, where you at?" Lajla replied, "I'm at a rented cabin with Daniel Frick, one of the research team guys." On the other side, they dug up everything about Vanya's family. Turns out Vanya's brother had a son who got locked up 3 years ago for trying and failing to kidnap an 11-year-old girl. 4 weeks back, he got a short release, but he played the witness who bailed him out and vanished. When Walter heard the guy's name, he froze, because Lajla was with that same Daniel Frick right then. Daniel was keeping her busy with his smooth talk, pouring her drinks, and she was knocking him back. Meanwhile, Thomas's team reached Vanya's house and found a kid there. That meant Daniel was Iki. Just then, Lajla noticed a red flower tattoo on Daniel's wrist. She put it together. Daniel was Iki, but she was too drunk to make a run for it. Next thing, Iki started plotting to take her out. Somehow, Lajla forced herself to puke, cleared her head, and bolted out the back door. Iki was hunting for her everywhere, but she tripped and fell while running. Lucky for her, Walter showed up just in time to save her ass. But the case wasn't closed. They'd only found one girl at Iki's hideout. Alicia was still missing. They blasted Daniel's face all over the news channels and locked down the city. Still, Jim and his buddies didn't trust the cops. They formed their own crew to catch that kid snatcher and hit the streets. Jim was ready to end that psycho for good. This was the second time Walter saved Lajla from the jaws of death, even though she wasn't his real daughter. After finding Lajla, Walter was supposed to hand her over to her family, but her mom had killed herself, and sadly, she had no one else. So Walter adopted her. Lajla was starting to feel suffocated here and told him to book her a ticket out as soon as possible. Meanwhile, late that night, when Jim came home covered in blood, his dad freaked out. When asked, Jim said he'd been hunting. Still, just to be safe, his dad made him take off his coat and burned it. The next morning, Iki's body was found hanging from a crane in Maine. Suspicion immediately fell on Jim since he'd casually mentioned wanting to kill Icky, but there was no proof, so Thomas couldn't touch him. Then they found Jim's shoes in his locker, soaked in blood. They sent him straight to the lab. Things got crazier when Walter got a courier from some unknown person with a girl's braid inside. It was Lajla's braid. She recognized the ribbon tied to it. The kidnapper was taunting everyone, saying no one could catch him. Best guess? Daniel Frick was probably killed by the same guy, since Frick called himself Icky. As for Alicia, she was likely with the real Icky. They also figured out the blood on Jim's shoes was from a deer. The cops were striking out left and right, so the case got handed to retired Commissioner Walter. Orders came from above, so Thomas couldn't do jack about it. Feeling like a failure, Thomas got wasted that evening. When he was totally hammered, Saeed showed up. That's when Thomas spilled the beans. All this time, you guys were digging into Luis's affair. It was me. Yup, Thomas was having an affair with Luis, and he just blurted it out. When Lajla heard about this, she went straight to Thomas's place. There, she found Luis's phone, which might hold the secret to his death. She dodged Thomas and bolted back home with it. But Thomas was at her doorstep the very next second. Somehow, sneaking around and hiding, Lajla managed to escape and hid behind a house. From there, she saw Thomas putting on gloves. Panicked, she called the cops right away. But before she could say much, Thomas knocked her out and kidnapped her. Meanwhile, her dad had no idea what was going on. He was out fishing at his favorite spot. Hours later, when Lajla came to, she found herself locked up in the same creepy place where Icky used to keep her as a kid. Alicia was there too, and the second she saw her mom's phone, she recognized it. Lajla asked her to unlock it, and she quickly called Walter. He recognized her voice instantly, but the signal was terrible and the call dropped. Still, Lajla wasn't too worried. She knew Walter would track the location from the number and come find them. She was just explaining this to Alicia when they heard footsteps. Icky was back. Just like always, he was wearing a mask. But Lajla had already figured out he was Thomas. Only, when Icky pulled off the mask, Lajla froze. Her heart sank. She couldn't believe it. It was Walter. Walter was Icky. He grabbed the phone from her and shoved her into the corner, then took Alicia outside, just like he used to do with Lajla. That monster even cut off Alicia's braid. He used to use the hair as fish bait. One day, he was about to do the same with Lajla, cut her braid and strangle her too. She stalled by telling him she needed to finish her book, and when she got the chance, she locked him up and ran. Now in the present, after cutting Alicia's braid, Icky tried convincing her that Lajla was a liar and she shouldn't talk to her anymore. And being just 10 years old, Alicia believed him. But Lajla somehow got through to her and calmed her down. Together, they started trying different codes to unlock the door. When nothing worked, Lajla told her, "Next time Uncle Walter comes in, I'll distract him with small talk. You gotta run and slam the door shut behind you. That's how we're both getting out of here." Over there, Thomas had already found out that Luis's phone was missing. He figured out that it was Lajla who'd stolen it from his house the other day. He told Walter about it and also said that if that phone ended up in the wrong hands, his job could be in serious trouble. Walter replied that Lajla was sick and that he had already gone into her room, grabbed the phone, and handed it over to Thomas, since Thomas was going to get rid of the evidence anyway. After Thomas left, Walter grabbed a tarp and headed back to the basement. That was the same tarp he was going to use to wrap up Alicia's body. Lajla started begging, "Dad, why are you doing this?" This was the moment Alicia had to run, but she just stood there, frozen like a statue. Walter says he was totally into Lajla. He'd never felt that way about anyone before. So he started keeping tabs on her, watching her every move. When the time was right, he kidnapped her. But she was way sharper than he expected. She bolted the first chance she got. Her mom paid the price for it. Walter took out Lajla's mom and made it look like she killed herself. Then he adopted Lajla, raising her like some picture-perfect dad. Still, when the time came, she ditched him and took off for America. Not this time, though. To keep her here, Walter killed her friend Louise and snatched Alicia. That trick worked for a few weeks, but after Daniel Frick betrayed her, Lajla started talking about heading back to the States. So Walter offed Daniel too. One look at the bodies screamed revenge killing. Meanwhile, Thomas swung back to the farmhouse to ask Lajla some urgent questions. That's when they found a dead cop in her room, the one sent to protect her. The guy had a photo of Lajla's mom. Maybe he'd figured out who Walter really was. So Walter got rid of him too. Tomas called it into the station right away. When he stepped outside, the farmhouse door was wide open. There was a box lying there, lid off, stuffed with braids from a bunch of girls. Now it was Alicia's turn. She wasn't useful anymore. Lajla begged and pleaded, but Walter didn't care. He started choking Alicia. That's when Lajla lost it. She slammed her head into a mirror, over and over, until Walter finally let Alicia go. Then Thomas heard noises coming from the basement. He went down and was floored by what he saw. The two brothers started fighting, going at it hard. By then, the cops had rolled up outside. They got Alicia and Lajla out safe. Walter got slapped with life in prison. In the end, at Lajla's request, he spilled the beans about the girls whose bodies he dumped in his favorite spots. One mistake by a mad scientist tore the earth apart. The ground cracked open, entire cities swallowed whole. If it wasn't stopped in time, the end of humanity was guaranteed. And just then, from the sky came the one who could stop it. Superman. "30 years ago, a child was sent to Earth in a spaceship from a mysterious planet. That spaceship crash-landed near Kansas, where a humble farming couple found it and raised the child as their own, with love. That child grew up to become Superman. And 3 years ago, he stood before the world and said, 'I am Superman.' Now a brutal war had erupted between Baravia and Jahanpur. Baravia was moments away from conquering Jahanpur when Superman dropped into the battle, turning the tide. He stopped the war, saved innocent lives, and forced Baravia to retreat. But then, he faced a dangerous metahuman known as the Hammer of Baravia. For the first time ever, Superman was brought to his knees. Defeated and wounded, he crashed into the frozen wastelands of Antarctica, too weak to even move. But then, he let out a special whistle, and he came. Krypto, Superman's loyal companion. Overjoyed, Krypto leapt onto him, licking his face, tugging at his cape. Then with his teeth, he dragged Superman into the spaceship. Inside, Kryptonian bots began the healing process, and to give him emotional strength, they played one final message, recorded by his parents before sending him to Earth. "Son Kal-El, we love you more than life itself. Our planet is on the brink of destruction. We searched the universe and found only one place where you could live, where your presence would matter, where the spirit of Krypton would survive. That place is Earth." The rest of the recording was damaged. Meanwhile, a massive magnifying lens beamed sunlight onto Superman's body, and within moments, he was nearly 80% healed. You see, Superman's Kryptonian cells absorb energy from the yellow sun. It's what makes him strong. It's what heals him. Just then, a mysterious metahuman who had been tracking him arrived. Her name, Engineer. Metahumans. Individuals born or mutated with powers beyond human limits. From a distance, she spotted the spaceship, but as she approached, it vanished into the ice before her eyes. Without wasting a second, she reported it to her boss, Lex Luthor. But Luthor ordered her to stand down, for now. Back in the ship, as Superman reached full strength, he soared back into the skies like a thunderclap. Engineer immediately alerted Luthor. "He's active again." In the very next moment, Luthor commanded his tech team to prepare for battle. Meanwhile, in a city near Jahanpur, the so-called Hammer of Baravia was spreading terror. His message echoed through every street and every screen. "What Superman did to Baravia, our people will never forgive." Fueled by vengeance, he stormed into the city, killing innocent people. That's when Superman arrived, and the two collided once more. It was here that the truth came out. Hammer was being controlled by Luthor's team. He was American, a wolf in disguise, sent to attack civilians for Luthor's own twisted agenda. Superman fought him again, but this time too, Hammer had the upper hand, because behind him was Lex Luthor's genius. For the past 3 years, Luthor had been studying Superman, analyzing every move, every strategy, and for every possible attack, he had prepared 2,500 counter moves. Luthor would give real-time commands to his tech team, and Hammer would execute them like a puppet. That's why, for the second time, Superman lost. After his victory, Hammer gave one final warning to the people of Jahanpur and vanished. Within seconds, the entire nation was buzzing with the news. Somewhere else, a man was seen helping Superman. Luthor assumed he must be someone close to the hero, but the truth? He was just a guy who once gave Superman a free sandwich, the day Superman saved a woman from being hit by a taxi. After bringing Superman to his knees, Luthor's team was in full celebration mode, and right then, the Engineer returned. The very next morning, Clark Kent's exclusive report made front-page headlines in the Daily Planet, covering the devastation in Jahanpur and the full story behind Hammer's attack. There was joy at home. His mom wanted him to keep going just like this, and one day become the most respected journalist in the world. But here's the catch. Aside from his parents and his girlfriend Lois, no one knows that Clark Kent is Superman. To protect his real identity, he wears special hypno lenses, glasses that create a subconscious hypnotic effect. So anyone who looks at Clark believes he and Superman are two totally different people. Meanwhile, the president of Baravia held a fiery press conference, shouting to the world that the so-called Hammer of Baravia wasn't from their country at all. He said, if anyone claims otherwise, then prove it. But far away, deep inside the Pentagon, another game was unfolding. Luthor was now presenting his private metahuman army, Planet Watch, to the US government. He claimed that his army was powerful enough not only to take down foreign threats, but also to control the Kryptonian alien, Superman, and he had proof to back it up. You see, Luthor didn't just want to defeat Superman, he wanted to prove to America that he was their ultimate weapon. But the Pentagon director wasn't buying it. Something didn't feel right. He suspected Luthor of pulling a double cross. And for good reason. Over the last 2 years, Baravia had purchased nearly $80 billion worth of weapons from Luthor Corp. That meant the war between Baravia and Jahanpur was a goldmine for Luthor's weapons business. But Superman stepped in and stopped that war, costing Luthor billions. Luthor fired back, no, that alien is a threat to mankind. His true power is hidden inside a secret base in Antarctica, which violates international law. Interrogating him would not be unjustified. Some officials agreed. It was risky to let an alien walk around freely, but arresting him without solid proof? Impossible. To the public, Superman was a hero. Luthor made one final push. His haters are rising. People are starting to see his true colors. But the Pentagon refused to listen. Luthor knew then his plan had failed, but he wasn't done yet. That very night, he released a hideous creature into the city. By morning, it had grown into a monstrous giant. The Justice League joined Superman to contain it. While they were busy battling the beast, Luthor and his team made their move toward Superman's base, the Fortress of Solitude. The creature? Just a distraction. As they approached, the ice cracked open, and the massive fortress emerged. But the most shocking part? Somehow, Luthor opened its doors. No one knows how. Seconds later, a war broke out between Luthor's team and the Cryptobots. But in front of the engineer, none of them stood a chance. They were all taken down. Suddenly, Krypto leapt onto her, but even he was captured. Then, the team began searching for any proof that could force the Pentagon's director to authorize Superman's arrest. That's when the engineer found it. A damaged message Superman's parents had sent years ago, buried deep in the system, but the engineer's tech skills were unmatched. She restored the corrupted file, and when she unlocked the full data, everything changed. Back in the city, it took Superman and the Justice League hours to bring down the rampaging monster. But the good news? No civilian lives were lost. The crisis was under control, but the conspiracy was far from over. Suddenly, every major digital billboard in the city lit up with a breaking news alert. Under Superman's photo, a message flashed, Kal-El, the alien sent to conquer Earth. Within seconds, the same message flooded phones, tablets, and every screen across the globe. The crowd erupted in outrage. You see, this was the same recovered message, the one Kal-El's parents had sent him. But now, the final hidden part was out for the world to see. In that message, his parents said, Son Kal-El, we love you more than life itself. Our planet is dying, and we've found only one place in the entire universe, Earth. It's a peaceful, fragile civilization. You must rule over it. Anyone who refuses to bow, destroy them, and take as many women as wives as you can, so the Kryptonian bloodline will live on. Since the original message was in the Kryptonian language, Luthor had it translated, and not just by anyone, but verified by 28 top international linguists. Meanwhile, 30 elite cyber labs declared the video authentic. No edits, no manipulations. And then, Luthor made an even bigger claim. He suggested Superman might have a hidden royal harem somewhere, where he's been forcing women to marry him. The situation spiraled out of control. People no longer saw Kal-El as a protector, but as a deceiver, an alien invader. Even Kal-El himself was shattered by the revelation. He never expected something like this from his own parents. Deep down, he wondered, could this message really be fake? It was damaged for so long. How was it suddenly recovered now? That's when Mr. Terrific stepped in. Justice Gang's tech genius. He examined the message from every possible angle, and his verdict was clear. It's not fake. Even the source code is authentic. Hawkgirl snapped, but how did it even get leaked in the first place? And the next moment, Superman soared into the skies, racing toward his secret base, the Fortress of Solitude. Meanwhile, the Pentagon was in chaos. This was no longer a rumor. If the message was true, stopping Superman had become a global priority, and fueling the fire was Baravia's president. In another loud, dramatic press conference, he screamed to the cameras, "Superman is obsessed with our women. He's taking them into his so-called royal palace. He thinks he's a god, but in reality, he's a monster." And as soon as the conference ended, the president stormed off to his office and entered a secret portal. On the other side, Luthor was already waiting. Now it was clear. The two were working together, united in one mission: eliminate Superman. Back at the fortress, Superman had arrived. There he found four, completely broken, trying to destroy himself in guilt. Superman demanded, "How did Luthor get in here? This place can only be accessed through my DNA." But four had no answer. Then confirmation came in. Krypto was missing. Furious, Superman rocketed straight to Luthor. His voice thundered as he shouted, "Where is Krypto? Tell me!" Luthor stood there, cold and silent. But his team, they were recording every word, every emotion. They captured Superman's breakdown on camera, planning to use it later to paint him as unstable. "Look at him," Luthor would say. "This is the alien sent to destroy our planet." By now, the Pentagon had officially ordered Superman to surrender. And Superman was actually considering it, because surrendering might be the only way to reach Krypto. He never came to Earth to rule anyone, and Lois understood that better than anyone. But risking everything for a dog? Even she wasn't sure that was wise. Still, the very next morning, Superman surrendered. Now, truth be told, there's no prison on Earth that can hold someone as powerful as Superman. Only one substance can weaken him: kryptonite. But kryptonite doesn't exist anywhere on this planet. Except Luthor had someone on his team, a man with the rare ability to forge any element, any substance from scratch. And that's why the Pentagon handed Superman over to Planet Watch. They took him to a military base, where soldiers wasted no time shoving him into a mysterious portal machine. Inside that cell, someone was already waiting, a strange man with the power to create any substance or element with his bare hands. And standing right outside that cell was Luthor. Superman asked, "What is this place?" Luthor replied, "This is a pocket universe, an alternate reality created by me. I built a machine that recreated the same explosion that sparked the birth of our universe, the Big Bang. That blast tore a hole in time and space, and we're standing right in that crack. The only way in was through a portal built by Luthor himself, scattered across different locations." In the middle of that conversation, Luthor gave Rex a subtle nod, and the very next second, Rex forged kryptonite in his hands, the one element Superman was weakest against. This prison held only those who dared speak against the government or against Luthor. He even locked up his own ex-girlfriend here. Inside this pocket universe were Luthor's infamous monkey bots, the ones who trolled Superman online around the clock. Even his super dog, Krypto, was locked up here. Luthor had messed with his brain, planting images of squirrels to keep him distracted and under control. As for why they were all still alive, Luthor was under pressure from the government. They wanted every last answer from Superman before making a move. In the cell right across from Superman was Rex's own son, held hostage, just to keep Rex in line. If he refused to cooperate, they'd kill his boy. The very next day after Superman's capture, Baravia launched another campaign to seize Jarhanpur. Meanwhile, Lois started connecting the dots. She had a source inside Bodabank, someone with critical intel. The world believed Luthor Corp had sold weapons to Baravia worth $6.55 trillion. But here's the kicker. Baravia had only paid $1.355 trillion so far. Luthor was practically giving them weapons for free. But why? That question needed answers. Just then, Jimmy received a coded message from his source. It read, "Superman is being held inside Luthor's pocket universe." But what the hell is a pocket universe? No one really knew. That night, Jimmy met his source at a deserted location, a road with no surveillance cameras for miles. Turns out, his source was none other than Luthor's own girlfriend, Eve. She'd fallen for Jimmy. She wanted out, but escaping Luthor wasn't easy. She knew what he did to his exes. He locked them away in that cursed pocket universe. She was terrified, thinking she'd be next. Her only shot at freedom was exposing Luther. If she could bring out one solid piece of evidence that revealed who he truly was, maybe then she could be free. Jimmy told her, "There's something dark going on between Luther and Baravia. You need to find it." And she agreed. The next morning, Lois went straight to the Justice League for help. She hoped they might have some insight into the pocket universe, but the League refused. They believed Superman was trying to enslave them. Only Mr. Terrific trusted her. He'd secretly implanted nano-GPS trackers in Superman's blood some time ago. And that signal? It vanished right near Fort Tremor military base. That could only mean one thing. Superman was trapped inside a pocket universe. Mr. Terrific promised to help, but he was strictly against breaking Superman out by force. The very next moment, he and Lois set out, headed straight for Fort Tremor base. Luther had finally confronted Superman, armed not with weapons, but with some burning questions. His first, "Who raised you?" And to force an answer, he held a gun to the head of a man, just an ordinary guy, someone once seen helping Superman. Kal-El stayed calm. "He's not my friend. Let him go." But when Superman refused to name his parents, Luther pulled the trigger. The man dropped dead, and as he walked away, Luther said just one thing: "Until you talk, I'll kill every person you've ever known, one by one." Watching the innocent man die, Rex broke down in tears. Meanwhile, Mr. Terrific had reached the Fort Tremor military base with Lois, but Planet Watch soldiers recognized him and launched an attack. Without hesitation, Terrific covered Lois inside a protective shield and dove into the fight. It took him just minutes to wipe them all out. Finally, he reached the place where the real portal existed, but stepping directly inside, impossible. Terrific got to work, hacking into the portal system while warning Lois, "Creating a pocket universe is dangerous. One small glitch, and it could form a black hole powerful enough to swallow the entire Earth." Back with Kal-El, watching Rex cry, he said, "If you want, I can save your son in the blink of an eye, but you'll have to destroy the kryptonite." Rex didn't think twice. He neutralized it instantly, but Kal-El still didn't heal, because his body only recovers in the warmth of the sun. Hearing that, Rex took the raw elements of a star and forged a tiny sun. Meanwhile, Mr. Terrific had managed to hack the portal, but jumping in, still deadly. One wrong step, and a dozen hidden portals would swallow them whole. Terrific decided, "We're sending in drones first, to scan the terrain." Inside, the place burst into blinding light. The guards were stunned, unable to see what was coming. And then, Superman stood back up, fully healed. He rescued Rex's son, freed Krypto, but now they had to get out. And the portal? It still wasn't open. Suddenly, the guards attacked. Rex was surrounded. In a flash, he turned his own body into acid and burned every one of them to ash. But the portal didn't stay open for long. It began closing, fast. Mr. Terrific and Lois were running out of time. He was still trying to locate Superman. And just then, Krypto appeared. But Superman, carrying Rex's son, had fallen into a river of molten lava, heading straight into a black hole. They were both being dragged in. In that desperate moment, Kal-El let out a whistle, and Krypto came flying, saving the boy just in time. But now Krypto was trapped. That's when Rex jumped. With Superman's super breath and Rex's quick thinking, they narrowly escaped being sucked into the void. Terrific's drone locked onto their signal, and one by one, they followed it back out of the pocket universe. But Kal-El was in bad shape. Kryptonite was still in his bloodstream. He'd need at least 2 days to recover. Terrific had to stay behind to study the portal. "I'll stay. You take Superman somewhere safe," he said. His T-craft could sync with any brain, so Lois could fly it now. As for Rex, he simply left, quietly, with his son in his arms. When Luther found out Superman had escaped the pocket universe, he went ballistic. He unleashed his fury on his own team. Even Eve wasn't spared, but this time, Eve had had enough. She immediately sent all the evidence she had to Jimmy. But when he opened the file, there were only some of her pictures. That's it. Still, Luther didn't take chances. He had her locked up inside the pocket universe. Meanwhile, Lois had brought Superman back to her home, where his father, Jonathan, broke down in tears seeing his son in such a condition. Lois tried to comfort him. "He'll be fine in 2 days." Just then, Jimmy forwarded the evidence sent by Eve. But at first glance, Lois was confused. Why did Eve send a selfie as evidence? But then, while talking, Lois's eyes caught something in the background of that selfie, and that's when the truth hit her. In the background was a map of Jarhanpur, split into 2 zones. one labeled New Baravia, the other Luthoria. The plan was crystal clear: take over Jarhanpur and split the land in half. Luthor wanted to build his own nation, Luthoria. Meanwhile, to flush Superman out of hiding, Luthor activated the space-type clamp, a weapon that could be shut down only with a passcode. Within moments, the space-type clamp was live, and even Mr. Terrific couldn't stop it. The destruction was accelerating by the second. But Superman? He lay there wrapped in a blanket, totally unaware of what was unfolding. A little while later, his mom told him to turn on the news. And on the TV screen, live footage from Jarhanpur and Baravia. At the border, the Baravian army stood fully armed, locked and loaded, and in front of them, the innocent citizens of Jarhanpur, unarmed, just sticks in their hands, pleading for Superman to help. That's when Mr. Terrific warned him about the space clamp. Kal-El was now staring at two choices: save Jarhanpur or save Metropolis, where destruction from the space clamp was about to begin. The government had already issued evacuation orders. Chaos was everywhere. Meanwhile, Lois had explained Luthor's full conspiracy to her editor, with proof. It could be the biggest story ever. And the moment her editor saw the truth, the report went public. On the other side, Crack had already reached Luthor's base, but Luthor still didn't shut the clamp down. And the result? His entire base split in two. Thankfully, it was aboard a ship, but the question was, where will the ship even land when there's no ground left to land on? And then, Superman arrived. He was saving the people of Metropolis from total annihilation. At the same moment, Mr. Terrific reached him too. By now, he'd figured out that the clamp could be stopped with a single code. But the code couldn't be hacked. Maybe access was only possible from Luthor's base. But before they could head there, they were ambushed. Mr. Terrific was knocked out cold. The engineer and a masked metahuman launched a brutal attack on Superman. The two of them started beating him savagely. And in that moment, the engineer executed her plan. She injected deadly particles directly into Superman's lungs. Because the only way to kill Kal-El was to suffocate him. But Kal-El wasn't going down that easy. He shot straight into space. Both attackers followed him upward, but they couldn't stop him. Kal-El grabbed them both at the edge of the atmosphere, then started plummeting back to Earth at full speed. The engineer quickly realized that if she hit the ground at this velocity, she'd die instantly. But Kal-El, he's an alien. He'd survive. She tried everything to break free, but couldn't. When all three of them slammed into the ground, everything changed. The engineer didn't die, but she was in no condition to move. On the other hand, the masked metahuman, he was completely fine, just like Superman, except his mask had torn off, and the truth was now out. He wasn't just anyone, he was Superman's clone, created by Luthor using just one strand of Superman's hair. You see, every time Superman fought a battle, Luthor would go searching through the rubble afterward, looking for even a trace of DNA. And one day, he found it, a single strand of Kal-El's hair. That's all he needed. From that, Luthor extracted Kal-El's DNA and built a clone. That's why the clone was able to enter the Fortress of Solitude, because the only key to that door was Superman's DNA. Luthor wasn't just any scientist. His mind was sharper than legends like Galileo and Einstein. But whenever people compared him to those greats, it infuriated him. Because in his eyes, he wasn't equal to them, he was greater. Sure, Galileo and Einstein had at least contributed to humanity, but Kal-El, he got his superpowers as a handout. Without breaking a sweat, he became the world's so-called hero. And that's exactly why Luthor wanted him dead from the very beginning. Taking over Jarhanpur was just a bonus. His real goal was to use this war as a smokescreen to destroy Superman. Luthor claimed, "My clone is even more powerful than Kal-El and far easier to control." Kal-El was getting pounded with blow after blow, but suddenly, it clicked. He realized Luthor was guiding the clone using drones flying all around. Without wasting a second, Kal-El whistled for his dog, Krypto, and gave the command, "Destroy every single drone." In a flash, Krypto blinded Luthor and ripped through every last drone, and without that guidance system, the clone was worthless. Meanwhile, Baravia's army began advancing on Jarhanpur, and Kal-El, still nowhere in sight. Chaos spread. People were running for their lives. But now that Luthor's true face had been exposed, the Justice League finally stepped in to defend Jarhanpur. And just in time, they brought the situation under control before it spiraled. Not only that, but Baravia's president was also exposed. Hawkgirl handled him her way by flying him high into the sky and letting go. While all this unfolded, Superman was still busy tearing his clone apart. until Planet Watch's entire army arrived, but not one of them could even touch him. Superman unleashed his laser vision and wiped them all out. And the clone? He was hurled straight into a black hole with no chance of ever coming back. After that, Mr. Terrific and Superman stormed Luthor's spaceship. Mr. Terrific quickly shut down the space clamp and reversed it, pulling Earth back into alignment as the giant cracks in the ground slowly began to heal. In the end, the US government had no choice but to accept the truth. Luthor was the real traitor, secretly working with Baravia, and all those schemes to ruin Superman's image, all traced back to him. Every innocent soul Luthor had trapped in his twisted pocket universe was finally freed, and Luthor himself taken into custody. Eve and Jimmy finally get the happy ending they deserved. But in the post-credit scene, the story takes a darker turn, as Superman's cousin, Supergirl, makes her entrance, struggling with a full-blown addiction. That dog, Crypto, he originally belonged to her, and she had left him in Superman's care just for a little while.